everyone, welcome to Contact Lost. It's yet another episode with me, Tomek, as the host. And with me today, I have two fantastic people. I won't say two fantastic guests because that wouldn't be completely true. With me today, I have one of our other co-hosts, not Joker, but the guy who was the brain behind our LGT coverage, the technical mastermind who made LGT and LGT coverage happen. So I have here Vitalis. Hi, dude.
Hello, guys.
And with us today, I also have another mastermind, another wonderful, wonderful player, a very handsome man at the same time, but also a guy who used to play a couple of armies, but now plays the one that is the topic of this episode. So Leagues of Votann. Everyone, please welcome the coach of the Polish national team, Mr. Danny Porter.
Hello. You're just flirting with me too much, man. It's
No, it's
it's
all
enjoyable.
well deserved. It's all well
Also,
deserved.
this is my first time with Vitalis, so this is nice.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
First time here, yeah.
Yeah, so it's Vitalis is a podcast virgin, although he has done a lot of technical stuff in the background of our podcast before. So this time you can hear him on the mic. This time we're not doing it with cameras, just because I don't have enough USB slots in my laptop to actually plug in a camera, because I have a mic, I have a mouse, I have a headphone set, and I just didn't find one for the camera, so that's on me. Also, everyone, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the episode, I think I owe you an apology. Joker has already made an episode that is out there on YouTube and on Spotify and so on and so on, but he didn't really go into great detail when it comes to why we had such a long break. And I think I'll start with saying I'm sorry, or we're sorry, for not being there with you for the last month. But seriously, there's been so much stuff going on for us as a podcast team in our private life, professional life, and so on, that we just couldn't manage to, group up together and record something. First of all, I think all three of us suffered the post LGT burnout, and don't get us wrong, it was an absolutely fantastic experience, an absolutely fantastic event. We met all the famous people that you can think of, also our listeners over there, and it was an absolute blast. But the road to the LGT that we recorded, the series, you can check it out on our YouTube channel, and then all the coverage that we had done that you can find on the London Grand Tournament Facebook page. It was just so draining and so intensive that we just felt a little bit burnt out, and I think we had the right to. It went great, but we needed a break. And
It
then,
was a blast, but it blasted us out of our shoes.
absolutely, yeah. So it was really draining, and I, for one, although having experienced all those fantastic players, all those beautiful miniatures, and so on, I went home planning on buying a new army, but the plans didn't come to fruition until like 3 weeks later or something like that, because I just needed some break. Plus, if you've listened to our podcast for a longer while, at least since not LGT, WTC, you would know that for a while I worked as an interim manager for a team in America in my company, which meant that I needed to work the late shift, or out of my normal shift, which rendered it almost impossible to find time to record episodes. Plus a lot of like stuff, in the middle, or in between. Sorry, like my wife adopted a new dog when we were at the LGT, so now I have two dogs that require attention. Blah blah blah. So yeah, just a huge sorry. I don't want to make any other excuses, but all these that I've just made are legitimate, and I hope you understand. And from now on, I promise we will be back with our regular, normal content that you can count on to appear every week. Or, well, if we are unable to do it, we will let you know in a post or something like that. But that's essentially the introduction. I'm again sorry, and hopefully you'll stay with us still. Now let's get
Wait,
to the meat
quickly.
of
So
it.
every
Yeah,
time
go on.
you cover a tournament, your wife adopts a dog.
Yeah,
Am I hearing
That's
that
he
right?
basically learned about that at the airport.
Yeah. So
Nice.
she was like, we did discuss having more than one dog, because we already had one dog, also adopted. And we did discuss that probably at some point in the future we would like to have another one, but I didn't expect it to be like in 3 days.
Well, you can't say
Something
no
like
if you're
that.
not there, right?
Yeah, that's it. But also, the situation was such that the dog was found in a ditch somewhere around Warsaw, almost starved to death. So it looked like
Oh,
a sack of bones, basically. And the foundation found him. They made a post on Facebook, and they were looking for someone to immediately take him because they didn't have like a home, like a temporary home that they could put him in. So it was either take him now or he will go to the shelter. So my wife just said, "Okay, bring him over. I'll take care of him." And then, when we were at the airport, she called me and she was like, she sent me a picture and like, "Are you mad?" And I'm like, "Are you
what?
mad?"
What an absolute angel.
Yeah. So that's the, as I said, the private life part that got into the way as well, but it's all sorted now. I have now learned how to walk two dogs on two separate leads, and so on, so it's fine.
Perfect.
Right, we are here to discuss something that for a long while has been considered, I guess, the boogeyman, the I don't know, something that will break the hobby probably. We've heard rumors about the army coming out being OP even before it came out, even before the book dropped. It was already known that this army is going to be extremely strong. And then we got gossip like German TOs are banning the army and so on and so on and so on. Danny, you've played a plethora of armies before, but you are most notorious for playing GSC. You had a romance with CSM as well. Now you're playing Votann. Um, Before we go into like how you are doing with this army, maybe tell us, did this or do you agree with everything that was said about the army before you picked it up?
Um, yes and no. For me, I already decided I'm going to pick this army up when I first saw it in like June.
Okay.
Because for me, I really love the aesthetic. It's like right up my street. Obviously, my favorite aesthetic being GSE, of course. I just wanted something a little bit differently, and I'm not a big fan of Space Marines. However, this is like little tiny angry Space Marines. So I thought actually this is the sci-fi style that I really like. And I saw the bikes and the Terminators, I was hooked. So that's why I picked them up. I needed a fresh challenge as well. I picked up CSM. However, I feel like they didn't really need a massive skill requirement to do well with them, in comparison to say GSE, for example. So I needed a new challenge because I was kind of bored of CSM already. I'd done 4 tournaments and I'd only had one loss, which is pretty good. But it didn't feel like I could do much with the army anymore because of how it's built. So I was like, when I saw the dwarves were coming out, I always knew I'm going to pick them up. It's a new army, it's a fresh challenge. And I got access to the rules a little earlier than most people through a variety of sources. And admittedly, when they first arrived to everybody, some of the aspects were really strong, like a little too strong. The whole Magna Rail thing, if it auto wounds, it counts as a 6. That is ridiculous. And there's so many interactions that work off that made the book insane. However, and of course, auto wounding on a 4, 5, and 6 is really strong. I'm not denying that at all. I think people are right to be. They were furious or angry that this creep is happening, and that's absolutely fine. I totally get that. However, I don't agree that it was the strongest when it came out. I do think things like Drakari, when they dropped onto the shelves at that particular time, or Tyranids, when they dropped with their codex, were a lot better than GSC Votann when they dropped when they dropped their codex, for a plethora of reasons. So I get why people think that this is a really strong army, but I've seen pro players saying that this is the strongest book they've ever released, and that's just not true. I think people are more angry at what Games Workshop have done or where Games Workshop are heading with the game than they are actually at the armory itself, if that makes sense. Because obviously it's very
Okay.
clear that the power creep is happening. We can see that if we compare like Votann now to where Death Guard is. Like the two codex just do not match at all. in terms of power level. So we can see that creep is happening, and I think people were more angry at Games Workshop for allowing such creep than they were logically thinking about the book, because it's just not in the same ballpark, in my opinion, as Tyranids Codex on release, but it is a very strong book, saying that.
Okay. Vitalis, same question to you. I mean, what were your initial impressions when the book leaked? Because, as I said, it seemed, or as Danny said, even the most, let's call them pro players, the pro players, the top of the UKTC, so Vic VJ and David Gaylard, for example, their podcast, in their podcast, they said, this army is absolutely broken. They said the book was outrageous, basically. Did you feel the same, or did you feel like, ooh, this is interesting? I mean, you do play all the armies that are out there, so did you immediately think, I need to buy this as well?
Well, I didn't think I need to buy this ASAP, because initially I hated the aesthetics. They started growing on me later on. But first of all, let me go back to what Danny just said. I think it's not the codex that was broken itself. It was for me, but the edition itself, it's more the symptom of the disease than the disease itself. Because there are so many mechanics in the Votanns that just require to roll full 4+, like the auto wounding, like the invulnerable on half of your army, like the Terminators and Fortress in Ymir. So that's more of an addition problem than the Votann itself. But going back to my initial thoughts about the codex, that I also had an opportunity to look a bit earlier than most of the people. First of all, I came to the Votanns, to the leagues, right from playing the Hail of Doom Eldar. So auto wounding on 6s in Eldar was crazy strong for me. So when I saw that the Votanns can do it on 4+, I was like, what the hell is just happening here? They will shot everything on sight. Second thing, also mentioned by Danny, was the Magnas. Because right now, after the nerf, when they are not auto-wounding on 6s anymore, they are just better last cannon. And before, there were like Deus Ex Machina, that you can just point at something and it goes boom. Nevertheless, it was infantry, because the wounds would spill, or it was a heavy vehicle, because its strength, I don't know what's heavy, Magna 12, something like that, with no invuls and lots of damage. So yeah, when I first looked at it, it was busted for me.
Okay, all right. So do you think that the international community was right to ban them, because some countries did? Was it the right decision to do? Should you
For me, 100% not. And not due to the power creep levels, because that's the one thing, but it makes a dangerous precedence, in my opinion, because if we are banning one army, why we didn't ban, like, for example, Tyranids, that were also crazy strong? Why we didn't ban Harlequins? Why we didn't ban Tau at its peak? Why we are not banning Necrons right now? They're also crazy in their own way. It's not about the army and its power level. It's about the precedence and creating something that we in Poland at one time called the Polhammer. Yeah, playing multiple variations of one game. If we're playing Warhammer 40k, we're playing Warhammer 40k with all its drawbacks and all its flashes. So either that or it all goes south, in my opinion.
Danny, so we can say whatever we want, whether the army was strong or not, but definitely GW listened to the uproar, listened to the reactions of players, and decided to introduce some nerfs even before the book officially came out. Do you think that was the right decision, and where are the Votann now?
I mean, I think it was the right decision to nerf them. They absolutely needed it. Like changing the whole interaction with the 6s to wounds was absolutely fine. That never should have been in the book in the first place. Because like we mentioned, things like Magna Rails, the Mortal Wound Strike, etc., was a little too strong, way too strong. In terms like just going back, I think I agree. No army should ever be banned. And I have a little bit of a personal problem with the people that are calling out for these bans, because I know plenty of people that played 9 Void Weavers and were fine with it. I know plenty of people that played Drukhari when they came out and were fine with it, or they've been playing Tyranids since and are absolutely fine with it, or perhaps not realizing that Tyranid is a little too strong, but they were all calling for Votann to be banned. And I have a little bit of it kind of annoyed me, the hypocrisy in this whole situation. And then the precedent. So like now I know Imperial Guard are going to come out and they're going to be pretty good. In fact, probably on par with Votann, but we'll see. That's my personal opinion from what I know about the rules. I'm just wondering if we're going to get the same reaction from the Germans or the German community or from other people. Are we going to then start seeing Guard get banned? Because obviously we've had a precedent that has been set now, and we have to follow that precedent. That's the whole point of it. So I'm curious how the community is going to react, or if this was just a one-off because it's not an army that people play, because it's a new army, etc. This is the contention I have with this whole scenario. You're going to say something?
No, well, I wanted to say, there were also voices that claimed that they made the army exactly what you said. It was a new army, so they made the new army crazy good to boost the sales, and then once they noticed that people actually have bought everything that was there to buy, they decided to nerf it. I don't know if that's the actual thing that happened, but
I think this is a tinfoil hat theory, which has absolutely zero substance at all. We know that for a fact, because most of the new models that have been released in Ninth have all had terrible rules. So this is just a tinfoil hat people like to throw in to try and I don't know, create a reasoning around what Games Workshop does. But we know that's not true. There's no evidence at all.
There is no reasoning.
I think
what GW does.
I think they were trying all the upheaval about the banning Votans came from a bit something else, because when we were talking about the Necrons, the Tyranids, the Harlequins, all that stuff, and Tau, and all those crazy armies that came out, they all had all the rules combined were super strong. So but I mean, in the Votans, they were just 2 crazy strong rules: the auto wounding and I think the Magnus. We can all agree on that. And I think that's the point, because they had let's call it the scapegoat in the codex that they can put all the roar about. There were no such scapegoats in Tyranids, because it was all around. In Tau, also all around codex strong. Harlequins, the same. Necrons came out a long time ago, and it is a bit different story with them. So I think that's the point, because there were 2 strong points in the codex that yielded such results, not overall codex.
Absolutely, and they did the right thing by nerfing this interaction with the auto wound in the 6s. The problem with this is, though, however, is it sort of created a bit of a disengage within the codex, because there are now a lot of things in that codex that don't work, because they all relied on this auto wound into the 6s.
How many Magnus you spilled? Because I have yet to spill one. With the new rules.
Well, yeah, luckily they actually did this before all of the rest of the models came out. So, and we've had a month since they nerfed it before they did the pre-orders. So plenty of people can't complain, because they didn't buy 3 fortresses and then have them nerfed. They've actually had them nerfed before they've had access to models. If people want a 3D print, then go for it. That's a different topic in general. So that actually, I have to praise Games Workshop for actually nerfing them quickly and somewhat appropriately. So in terms of the strength of the nerfs, yeah, they did it right with the 6s to wound. I do think that they went way over the top with the points, though. If anyone wants to discuss that.
Yeah, I agree about that because I think the units that were supposed to be even more nerfed in point wise weren't nerfed, like bikes, like Fortress, like the mechanic. I don't remember his name right now.
The broken.
Forge Master, yeah, whatever it's called. But the units that are not so strong, like Terminators, went like 10 points, I think, 50
The
points.
Berserkers, right?
Berserkers are different story because they are pretty strong. And I think their nerf was a bit deserved because right now at 30 points per model, they are fine.
Yeah, I
But
remember when I listened. Sorry, just one sentence. I remember listening to, I think Dustin Henshaw, who also plays GSC, from a player from Canada. I remember listening to his podcast, and he sort of organically started comparing the Berserkers to Aberrants from GSC because that's how
Mate, you can't do that. I've tried that. It doesn't work. It just depresses. Just don't.
Yeah,
I think the more close comparison would be Harlequins with old Dark Seat, because they are similarly fragile. They are not so mobile, of course, but I think the closest point is the fight on death, like the Harlequins had, and that would be a comparison here for me. And
that's an interesting take.
yeah, because that's the biggest point on the Berserkers. You just touch them in combat, and you don't care who goes first, whatever. They will do their job anyway, even if one of the guys is standing after enemy attacks. And the same thing was about the Harlequins. And I remember your episode about the Harlequins where Bloody was going nuts about that exact point.
You kind of sorry. Could just
No,
quickly.
go on.
You catch up on two things that's really interesting. That is, first one you mentioned about touching the berserkers and you don't care about who fights or first or whatnot. I don't think that's necessarily true. If berserkers die, you can't use stratagems, and this is something I'm sure we'll talk about soon. But the stratagems for things like the berserkers are really just powerhouse that unit way more than they should be, right? So the reroll all hit rolls for berserkers is important. So if you're rocking 3 attacks just with the thunder hammers, you're hitting on 4s. So statistically, you're hitting 1 or 2 attacks, and you really need these stratagems to really push them as a unit. So not necessarily. I agree that if you just touch them, you don't care if you fights first or not. The fight on death is really good. However, you do lose quite a bit if they fight on death, because they don't activate as a unit; they activate as a singular model. Additionally, you said as well that the Terminators is not one of the stronger units. I agree that the bikes are the best unit in the book, and they went up points, which is good. They went up 5 points each. They probably should go up another 5 points, but the Terminators are really, really strong, and that's something that I lean on quite a lot in my list that I use right now. But I don't think they should have gone up 10 points. I think they should probably go up 5 points instead. And then the Volkite weapon should probably be like a 3-point upgrade itself. So we would take it down to 43 points now rather than 45. But
yeah, my point was they're not. I agree with you. They're not the weakest unit in the codex. They were not deserving such big nerf point wise. Because I also use them quite heavily, but I guess we will get to that later.
Yeah, so let's try and bring in some structure into this. So let's just agree that the army seemed very powerful at the very beginning. There was dissatisfaction from the broader community as we know it, and then nerfs were introduced. Let's accept that. Let's treat this as a starting point for the actual discussion. So yeah, let's look at this army. Is this still a boogeyman? That is threatening the meta, the tournament scene, blah blah blah. Danny, I'll start with you. When you look at the book now, at the army now, what are the highlight of the codex post nerfs? So first of all, maybe if I'm going to a tournament tomorrow, and I know that this army is allowed, what should I expect? What are the most important traits of this army?
okay, so the good thing about the book is it's quite really good internal balance. So things like the leagues, most of the leagues are very usable. A few are quite situational. Two are very popular. So you've got the Tharian League and you've got the Emir. They're going to be your staples. So one of them has like better token generation. One of them has better survivability with the invulnerable save, which is very important. But also better shooting because of the +4-inch range and the +1 AP within half range. But so yeah, you've got that, and then obviously you've got the not being able to reroll wound rolls, which isn't, people are calling really broken, but it's not. Like, they have armor of contempt and reroll wounds. However, so do sisters, so do Iron Warriors, and so do salamanders. And arguably, that's not the strongest thing about their legions or their chapter or whatever. Otherwise, people would lean into them a lot more. So I think, yeah, I don't think it's that strong. Not many armies actually rely on rerolling wound rolls to pop off, unlike, say, sisters, for example. And then they've got armor of contempt, of course. And then they cannot be slowed, which I think is probably even better, depending on what tables you play on, because obviously we play on WTC predominantly. And then you've got armies like Tau, or you've got armies like Craftworlds, or other armies that can slow you. And on an army where it's got little tiny legs and they run 5 inches, not being able to be slowed is actually really good. Like, really good. For me, that is better than no rerolls to wound. It's not better than armor of contempt, but it's better than no rerolls to wound, because the mobility for me is the highest strength that they've got, but we'll go into that later. So what I would say people do need to watch out for is how good their stratagems are. And I think the stratagems is like the cream icing on the cake. It just really takes these solid profiles and just like gives them a massive power boost. So let's say, aside from bikes giving out judgment tokens, units like berserkers can get full rerolls to hit, which is insane. And it really just adds in a lot of power. But then the mobility stratagems like teleporting your half guard, or throwing bikes into strategic reserves throughout the game, I find is really good. But then the board pressure, like, or specs on bikes over the fortresses, or the unit like, or mortals, for example, throwing out mortals from your fortress, or the reactive reprisal stratagem, which I think is going to be a massive play in higher level games. Which this stratagem basically, if you've got a token on a unit, if they shoot one of your units that's core, you can then shoot them back. You can't shoot them in your next shooting phase, but you can shoot them in their phase. And I think stratagems like this gives an absolute massive power level to this army. So I think things like this people need to look out for. That's what I would think.
Listening to this, and also, having read all the leaks and stuff that has been posted about this, it sounds like this army really takes what is best in other armies and just puts it into one basket, because it has the ignore movement difficulties, like, let's say, the Death Guard has. Then it has really strong shooting, like the Tau has. But when we want to understand the play style of this army, I mean, does every league play differently, or does the army share just one common play style with just a little bit of flavor here or there? Vitalis, how many games have you played with this army so far, and what is the play style that you assume in your games?
Yeah, I guess a lot less than Danny, because I played around 10 games, I think, with Votann so far, including, I think, like 3 against them. But first, let me go back to what Danny said about rerolling wounds. Maybe it's just my personal preference as recently also a Tau player, that rerolling wounds is not so strong. That's the main point on crisis suits right now, and as we know, that crisis suits are the cream de la cream of the Tau list recently, the 5-man dev squad. Without rerolling wounds, they are hurt a bit. And also, another point about this rerolling wounds is that in Sisters, in Salamanders, all that stuff, it's just a bonus to the particular chapter, right? And in Votans, you just have them. You don't care. Whatever you pick, you just have them. So I think it's a bit stronger, in my opinion, of course, than we just said. Going back to your question, I think the Votans are one of the books that has the most differentiated chapters, or the leagues, as they are called in there, in the game. Because the bonuses from the leagues are so specific that in one of the leagues you get bonuses to combat, in another one you get mentioned invulnerables, in another one you get mentioned +1 to toughness. So all the little things are affecting your list building, your playstyle. The token generation is different, so you also need to play around that. The Turian leagues gives the tokens like crazy. Other lists also gives them like crazy, but not so much. You have to plan around them. So Danny, what's the name of the league that gives you boost to combat?
Cronus.
Oh, okay. So the Cronus ones is gonna be built totally different than the Ymir one, for example. So no, the playstyles differ very much from the pretty much almost static gun line to rushing your transports into combat. I think even that the codex has very limited number of units right now, because I think it's the smallest codex right now, with counting the datasheets, or at least one of the smallest for sure.
It's probably not smaller than Harlequins, but yeah.
Well, the Harlequins are part of the Elder Codex, technically.
True that.
But I get your point. Yeah, true. But the options are deceptively a lot of those in the book, not just those couple sheets that we have there. Even like Danny mentioned, the stratagems. You get some stratagems to dish mortal wounds from beam weapons. So either you take beam weapons, or you don't, or you take the bolt guns. Whatever. There are multiple options in there that are deceptively hidden under the rules.
Okay, Danny. Same question to, or similar question to you. Like, give or take, how many games have you already played with Votann? And if we want to go into like the army a little bit more, like what are the most commonly picked up units in your lists?
Okay, so how many games have I played? I'm definitely almost 90 games.
Okay, you don't need me here, guys. I'm dropping off.
90 games. I played that in a year.
No, we've got like, my first physical game. This is all TTS. My first physical game is, of course, going to be next weekend. We've got our Warsaw tournament, haven't we? And yeah, like, I'm in a lot of different leagues, a lot of different tournaments, team tournaments as well. I do a lot of practice against different people. I over practice and I over test, because obviously I want to learn and I want to be ahead of the competition on understanding and mastering the armies, of course. But yeah, no, I played close to 90 games. So for me, what is the most played units, for example? I think this is where it differs. I think people, I can definitely see a pattern where the more experienced, the more understanding players play one thing, and the more general population sort of fall into a trap and play something else. So the most common thing I see is usually like a battalion with like the three squads of 10 warriors, and like 1 or 2 squads of 3 bikes, and like a fortress, 2 fortresses, all the characters. Maybe not even berserkers, not even half guard or anything like that, and they sort of fall into these safe traps. And I don't think that's a good idea necessarily, because I don't think that's where we are strongest. So, for example, for me, I run 18 bikes because bikes are incredible value for what they offer. A lot of people are running GTL at the minute because it does allow token manipulation. However, the value of tokens has gone down since I know that sounds really bad, but someone's probably going to pick up and get pitchforks and say, how dare you say that? But the value of tokens has gone down. especially stacking them, since they changed the auto wounding on becomes a 6. Because a lot of damage wasn't necessarily in the auto wounding on a 4, 5, and 6. A lot of the damage was the aftermath of what weapon you shot. So a real rifle doing 12 damage, no matter what, if it's a, just wiping out a full squad of Banshees or wiping out a full tank or whatever. For the auto wounding on a 6, removing that has, for me, given a lot less value to auto wounding on a 4, 5, 4 or 5. I find being able to just auto wound on a 5 or 6 is solid. What happened for me, though, the nerfs shifted for me the value of going from GTL to Emir because of that 5-up invulnerable save. And what I find right now is the units that can abuse this invulnerable save, so that's bikes, and that's berserks, and then to some extent the half guards, but that's for some other reason, are the best units. And that's not the fortresses, and that's not the warriors or the characters. It's definitely the bikes, the half guard, and the berserkers. And then obviously the Sagittars are in insane value for what you get.
Okay, so I don't think we're gonna go into all the stratagems in the book and all the relics in the book and all that. I don't want to make don't want this to be a book review, but I want to take the most out of it, make this the most informative, competitive wise as to what you can meet or see potentially at tournaments. So what are maybe the most important, the most viable interactions or combos in this book? And this goes to both of you. Any of you can pick up this question. What are the most common combos that you can expect at a tournament that we as players who don't play Votann should be ready for?
So maybe let me start because Danny, I guess, will add like a bazillion of combos on top of what I will say. So for me, basically, they mentioned shooting after being shot. That is pretty crazy on whatever you aim it, because all the units, it's limited to core. So basically, warriors and bikes going to be your main targets here, and the volume of shots from the bikes is crazy. For the points you pay for them, for even 3 of those, you get like 12 and plus 9, around 20 shots that are maybe not the best, but definitely not the worst. They're way above average bolters or something like that. Another crazy combo, also mentioned already, is the teleporting of the Terminators, because it can get you some unexpected places. If someone is not anticipating that, even if you said, "Hey, I can teleport these guys during the battle," especially when you can do it for 0 CP if you have the relic. The last combo, because I haven't played the mechanic yet, as in my list, I have played against it. And with just the mechanic unit and the fortress, or any vehicle, but I guess the fortress will be the main culprit here, it is deceptively tanky. I had a game yesterday that's fresh in my mind where Bloodthirster charged the fortress. It bounced off its invulnerable from Emir. One of the damage was reduced to 0 from the mechanic, and then another one was healed right after that. So it can be really tanky to take down with these 2 units side by side. Also, but that was pre-nerf combo, the Ion Blasters with the auto wounding 6s. Dishing out some mortals for 1 CP was also solid. I think that's what comes
Immediately to mind.
Yeah, to my head. Danny?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add a couple more on top of that actually. The Brokir just sort of babysitting the fortress is really good. The Brokir combination is really good as well because of the +1 to hit, but also the reducing CP by 1. And that's once per turn and once per battle round. So, for example, if you're in Emir and you've got the fortress, you're going to give him the 4 mortal wound stratagem for free, which if you're taking the beamer, which is really good. There are a couple more. I think that's quite important. So, for example, if you're taking the Ein here, which you really should, I think most lists should take them. The stratagem look has need keeps toil earns, I think it's called, is one of the only better ways to give them a feel no pain. So what that does is if you're on an objective at the end of your movement phase, so that's important because if you teleport them, then you can pop it once they hit onto an objective. They pass morale tests, which is massive because if you fail morale, or they auto pass them. So if you fail morale on a 45-point model unit, that's gonna feel really bad, especially if you fail it and then another 2-run. You know, you don't want that. So it auto passes the morale, but it also gives them a feel no pain on a 6+. And that's really good because then you can combo that with the +1 toughness, 6-up feel no pain, psychic power that can then go onto another unit. For example, if you've got bikes, so then you can stack the 2 up and share it. So then you've got a nice defensive layer on 2 units rather than being stuck on 1. So that for me is quite important. Going back to the reactive reprisal, what I find is quite good is abusing the so yeah, as we say, I'll take 6 bikes, I'll put +1 toughness, a 6-up feel no pain on them. I'm gonna put them into I'm gonna auto advance them into a really difficult. I'll give them the full rerolls to hit from the Carl, high Carl. I'll put them into a really obscure area of the board that my opponent would have to come and move out to shoot them. Otherwise, next turn they're going to get into their lines and start causing all sorts of havoc. So they've advanced. So that means they can pop Mag Riders. And this is also important. What I do is also keep them to the side of the board. So they'll pop Mag Riders. That means in my opponent's turn, they'll be -1 to hit. Because they've advanced, the hit roll cannot be rerolled. So it gives them quite a bit of survivability. They've got a 5-up invulnerable save and their toughness 6 and have a 6-up feel no pain. But then if they get shot and they survive, I'll pop reactive reprisal and I'll shoot them back with the full rerolls from the car. So already they're doing a lot of damage. They're surviving quite a bit. They're forcing the opponent to overextend. And then when they hit back, they're doing quite a lot of damage back. Bikes do a lot of damage. And what this means then, in my turn, I can't shoot him. But what I can do, I can either move forward and steal objectives, or maybe I can go and do an action, or I can pop the outflanking pioneer stratagem and then throw them into strategic reserves. So I've shot, and then I've moved them into a safety for the next turn to reposition elsewhere. And this will lead into my summary of the army's strengths, is that mobility for me is their biggest strength. But that for me has been one of the most, I'd say, it's a lot of CP, but it's one of the most impressive combos that I've come up with so far for me. What else are we looking at? There's also another one, for example, where bikers also can throw a marker up onto a unit with the, I can't remember what it's called. Someone else will probably know. Actually, light them up. I'll pick my book up. So light them up. For 1 CP, they can put a judgment token on once they've shot, as long as they've got the searchlight keyword, which they will. So that's quite good. Then we've got things like pan spectral warning, is a good combination. But I'm just thinking if there's anything else that's pretty spicy that I can sort of. I guess there's a couple of stratagems and combos where you can turn off Overwatch. Warriors amazingly can turn off Overwatch if you're within 6 inches for some reason, but yeah. But yeah, I think that
sounds good. Sounds incredibly strong. Sounds again like an army that is a very interesting toolbox in the combination of the units.
Did we mention that bikes were not nerfed enough? And they're the strongest unit in the codex.
So we did not have to say it like the way you did, because like everything we said points to it.
Before they nerfed the codex, I was telling everybody I would never run 18 bikes because I didn't feel like they were actually as good as other units in the army. I was looking at like 30 berserkers, or I had a list with like 30 terminators, and then they nerfed the codex, and immediately I was like, oh, 18 bikes looks good. Maybe I run that.
Yeah, it comes as no surprise. As I said, it sounds like there are so many ways you can buff and improve this unit, and it can play both offensively and defensively. Like there's nothing you can not like about them. But let's look at this army now from a maybe a little bit different angle. So let's think how to crack it, how to basically play around it. Does the army have any weaknesses, Vitalis? Like either playing against them or having played them in the past. Was there anything that immediately stood out to you as holy shit, I need to be careful about that, or holy shit, I hope my opponent doesn't realize that's a soft spot?
For me, I say I have been playing it a little bit different playstyle from Danny because I was looking at it more of a gun line. Like I
That's
said,
even better. Like
yeah, I
if you
was
two have different points of view, that's even better. Go on.
yeah, because I was focusing on especially pre-nerf on the fortresses, on the warriors with magnas, all that kind of stuff. Sorry. So my first impression that they played just a bit similar to Tau with my variations. And for me, the units that can close the distance pretty fast and are melee focused. So, like we mentioned, you cannot get shot in the face in your shooting phase. So cracking them in combat, I think, is one way of doing that. I think another way is volume of shots, because something like when I was playing Knights and I was playing against Thousand Suns, always what hurt me was the volume of shots from, example, Terminators, Thousand Sun Terminators with +1 to wound. And I think it's similar with Votann. They have pretty good saves for big guns, invulnerables, and some 2-ups on the Terminators, the Fortress. But some high load of shots with, for example, -2 AP will take him down eventually. So, and of course, the good old spam of mortal wounds, because aside from the droid, I call him the droid always. I don't even know what this unit is called in the reality. It's always the droid for me. Denying some psychic powers, and feel no pains, of course. But like we said, there are just two methods of stacking them. The mortal wound spam will also work nice. So the usual culprits will at least take, maybe not take them down very nicely, but give them a good fight. Are the Tyranids, the Harlequins. Tau to some extent will make a good gunfight with those guys. Yeah, not much of surprise here from my point of view.
Okay, Danny, moving to you. Again, you said 90-ish games probably gives you quite a clear picture of what, if anything, sucks about the army, of what, or what you need to take into account when you're building your list and when you're prepping for a tournament. So let's start with your overall impressions of the army weaknesses, and then I'll try to find some with some extra questions. But yeah, your impressions of the soft
Sure.
spots.
I think Vitalis is sort of nailed it on the head. So for me, the biggest problem with this army, and this is why I don't consider it as one of the best armies out there, especially in the current meta, is it's very high cost per wound. If we, apart from the bikes, Einheer Half Guard, they are 22.5 points per model. The Berserkers are 22.5 points per wound. Berserkers are 15 points per wound. A lot of their even bikers are 11 or 12 points per wound. The warriors, sorry, the halfkin are 12 points per wound before you factor any additional weapons, etc., which you need. It is quite expensive. We're talking we're talking Custodes level, right? Custodes level expensive models. It's a very elite army. However, they don't have the same failsafe as perhaps Custodes does. And this creates a lot of problems in a lot of matchups I've found. So mortals, like you've mentioned, if there was a league that gave me a 5-up Feel No Pain versus mortals, I would play that and I'd never look at any other league. Because I have lost games because I cannot survive. I don't know, let's say I played against one of our players. He popped up 2 Tyranids, and inside the Tyranids was zone ropes, and there was just no way to screen. I was dead. Turn 2, I was pretty much tabled. There's just no survivability against alpha striking with mortals. And I think this kind of leads into the problem I had when I said that they over nerfed them with the points cost. If perhaps they reduced the army by 7%, and I could add in, I think everybody should be able to add in one more warrior squad as a screen. I think the army would be in a much better, healthier position. However, right now, because it's so expensive, mortals, pure weight of dice, absolutely wreck this army. So sisters, like we said, sisters, Tyranids, absolutely. The whole Thousand Suns and Demons popping up is a massive problem. I know some people will argue with me. Like Vladdy had a really difficult game against Demons. However, I think he played it wrong. I'm sure he'll argue with me about that later. But if your flamers can, like, if the problem with this for me is any army that can trade 1-to-1 with yours, which a lot of armies can do, they're going to win because you only field in an average 9 to 11 units, whereas your opponent could field perhaps 15 plus. So if they can trade 1-to-1, you're going to really struggle. And that's where flamers come in, because 6 flamers are going to trade 1-to-1 almost identically with your bikes. And even then, because of the way their delivery system, they can do a lot of damage. So that's one thing. Mortal wounds, pure weight of dice wreck this army. The other problem that this army has is scoring. And we've seen right now, your codex can be absolutely dog shit, like Necrons to some extent. However, if you can score 90 points a game, it does not matter. And if you can score that passively, it does not matter. The problem with Votann is they do not have this capability. And I really hope you're going to release this after this weekend, so no one listens to this when they go to Warsaw and figure out how to beat this army. But right now, Votann rely on 2 killy secondaries, I would say, and 1 passive scoring. So if the opponent can take 2 passive scoring and 1 killy, they are forcing the Votann to play aggressively, and they can play around that. And that to me has been a massive problem I've found. So because they have low scoring objectives, things like Ancestors, for example. Ancestors is probably the best secondary, right? And if any of your unit, it can only score a maximum of 15 according to Nephilim. It cannot score 18 because at the end of the game, you count how many points you've got and you minus points if units with a token have survived. And that's the same with grudges as well. And grudges can be really good in the current meta because a lot of high value targets are quite 150 or higher points. However, if anything survives at the end of the game, you negate points from your scoring. But because of Nephilim have added in this maximum 15 cap, you actually cannot go over that, and you actually start scoring less and less. And this is a bit of a problem. So that's one thing. But then over scoring things like the prospects is just really bad because you can't start the action if a unit is on the objective. And then you compare that to like Necrons who can do that. They just have to control the objective. Or the late claim, which you would score points at the end of the game, but if you go first, you're in trouble. Like your opponent just has to be smart and keep some what's it called? Keep some offset towards the end alive. Now this is where the problem gets in. Another problem is that yes, Votann have really good models and really good units. However, their scoring potential is pretty limited, especially if the opponent is smart enough to start shooting down the bikes. So if you lose your bikes really early, you've got no way to score towards the middle of the board because your obsec is on your warriors. Apart from a warlord trait aura, there's no other way to give obsec. So if your opponent has really good target prioritization, it's really difficult once Votann get momentum. You can just cut the I don't know what the expression is. You can just like slow them down really quickly by being really good with the prioritization. Whereas, for example, with Necrons, let's say if you're against Necrons, it doesn't matter who you kill, they're all obsec. So I think
pretty much.
Yeah, I think the scoring is the biggest problem right now.
Okay, so as I said, I have a bunch of questions that I usually ask when we analyze armies to see where they sit and how they play. So a question to both of you, who again, whoever feels more comfortable, please pick it up. Does the army care a lot about the table? And I'm asking that probably with a view to team tournaments in the future. Will that army be one of those that wants to pick the table, and then that will be, I don't know, the more dense one, or maybe it doesn't care about the table? What do you guys think?
Vitalis, you can go.
Yeah, I think they're not one of the most stable reliant armies because, like Danny said, they are pretty mobile, so they can pick their angles at what they engage, what they shoot.
But they are scared of mortals, right? So they want to hide from like smites, for example.
Yes, but that's not the table problem because if you the discrepancy between the speed of the warriors and the speed of the bikes is so big that they don't care about the tables, especially that the bikes are accelerated, so they have better advance than the humble 3 inches advance of the warriors. So the screening is not table reliant so much. Their shooting is also a bit different than Tau because the -1 from the vents from the forest. Well, maybe that's not well. I lost the word. Not so not good words that it's different because it has more, I think, more rerolls than for example Tau. From the high call and the call and the normal call, if you get it more, and of course it gets more combat. So I think no, not the most stable reliant army, in my opinion.
Okay, Danny, your take?
I'm gonna sort of slightly disagree. I think it's a really interesting question. So, table matters depending on how you build your list. I mean, obviously that happens with most armies. However, I think the list building and the power and sort of your strategy can differ quite substantially. So, for example, fortresses. Fortresses can be really strong and really powerhouse. However, I think, for me personally, they fall short on WTC. And again, that differs between singles or teams. I assume we're talking predominantly singles here.
Yeah.
So the problem with that is if you play in a WTC tournament, you're actually really screwed, or let's say fucked up, because you're basing yourself on the luck of being able to draw a good table for you. So if you get like say table 7 and you're playing WTC, your opponent has so much leverage over how you play the game. If you play your fortresses, however, if you play something more mobile, like my list, I built entirely on mobility. Like it's purely the most mobile I could build out of an army, out of Votann, and I think it doesn't care about tables. It only cares about my opponent's agency on tables. Whereas fortresses absolutely care about tables because if you can't get the right firing angles, then they're almost redundant, right? However, if you can then throw them on UKTC maps instead of WTC, they're really good, like phenomenally good, because they have good mobility and there's some really good firing angles, which one day maybe Zach might fix. But they are really good on them tables. So yeah, it's a difficult question. I think they do and they don't care. It depends on how you build your list. Like I built my list because I do not want to have to rely on tables, and I can play on almost all tables. The problem is then I care more about my opponent's strength on tables. For example, Tau are really good if they've got ways where they can get awkward angles, but then they can fire and fade behind an L, even a small ruin. Whereas for me, I don't necessarily, because of the way I can play my army, like my bikes are going to jump in and out of strategic reserves. My Terminators can deep strike and teleport. I don't necessarily care about the tables themselves because no matter what angle, I'm going to get them. Whereas my opponents do. So I don't know if that's a good answer or that is an answer, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, it does. That's what I was going for. So let me dissect this a little bit more. we are now playing Nephilim. Nephilim has drastically decreased the amount of command points that you can take. Like my Tyranid army, my Tyranid lists have suffered greatly because of like the limitations of detachments that you can take and the detachment costs. So how does this army build? How do you build a list for this army? Do you pick multiple detachments, or is a battalion enough? And then the corresponding command point amount that comes with it, is it sufficient to be able to afford the stratagems that you want to use, or does this army struggle with this, or is it smooth sailing for them with that? So Vitalis, I'll start with you.
So I will just sum it up with one. I don't want to call him Druid anymore, so I will just find quickly how this guy is called.
Are you talking about the Grimnir?
Yeah, the Grimnir.
It's like
yeah, because the Grimnir for me.
The Grimnir.
Yeah, for in Nephilim, whenever I see you gain a CP that is not on 5+, I take it first, and then I start building the rest of the army. Because any gaining of CPs right now is crazy, and the Grimnir just gives it. You cast a power and you got a CP. That is crazy good in current meta. So that's the first thing. So you get an extra CP every turn, just like that, pretty much. Because he will, for me especially, he will just hang back around backlines to not be denied too much. So that's the first thing. Another thing for me is that all the relics, the warlock traits are nice, but they are not pretty must-have. Aside from maybe if you're taking the Brocknir, the reduction of damage, that is must take pretty much, because if you're taking the Brocknir, you're taking the fortress and you want it to be tanky. But for example, for high cal, and if experienced eye that is giving you extra judgment tokens is good to have, but it's also not necessary. So they're not bloated with must-have relics, must-have warlock traits. So you can cut some CPs on that. And like Danny mentioned, the stratagems in the codex are really, really, really good. So you can, even if you're taking the outrider detachment for the bike spam, you still are starting with, and taking some warlock trait, you're starting with like 3 CPs. You're gaining 4th at the start of the game. Then your Grimnir is casting his power. You will have 5 CPs at the start of your turn 1.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like a weakness then.
Yeah, that's a pretty good. So I think they are pretty safe in that detachment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Danny, your take.
So actually, this is something that I've been really struggling with myself, because I always want to try and start the game with 1 CP, because then when it's my turn, I've got 2, hopefully 3 with the Grimnir. I almost called him Druid myself. Hopefully then he's got 3. I can start my turn with 3. Yeah. And then, if I go second, I've got 4. But what I really want to do is, if my opponent goes first, I want to have enough CP to be reactive with some defenses, depending on how they approach me. So that might be perhaps, things like being able to reactive reprisal, like we've said. But then I also find that I need a patrol and an outrider, because I don't want to have to run more than 1 squad of warriors. I just don't think that they're quite pivotal in the army. Although I know a lot of people like them and a lot of people get value out of them. For me, they're just too slow. They're too much of a problem. I don't like them. So I'm having to use a patrol and an outrider, which means I'm already down 3 CP. But then I need the relic on my Einhir half guard, so I'm down to 2 CP. And then I'm using the stave, the murmuring stave on my Grimnir, because it allows me to cast, gives me the option to do psychic actions and still have 1 cast. because I always need either 1 CP or the +1 toughness and 6 of Feel No Pain. In fact, that spell is more important than the CP. Funnily enough, I am constantly in my mind asking myself, do I really need this relic? But so far, it's one of them, like a condom. I'd rather have it and not use it than need it and not have it.
Wonderful metaphor.
You can keep that one. So I keep asking myself, I keep convincing myself, right, I need to have it. And that's that. So then I'm down to 1 CP. And then I'm constantly bouncing between a Warlord trait. I don't like the Carl's Warlord trait, the Experienced Eye, or a long list. Why? Because I find my opponents aren't stupid and do not give me a line of sight vision in their command phase. I also find the problem that they try and bait him out to see them, and then he's put in a really bad position. So I can't rely on this, especially on WTC maps. In UKTC, GW, USO maps, that's fine. You've got a lot of shooting lanes. But in WTC, because of the way maps are built and they're so, you could be on a really open map one game, but then 4 dense maps for the next. It's the luck of the dice, right? Luck of the whatever table you've been given. I can't rely on it. However, I'm finding demons are very, very popular right now, and demons can be a massive problem if they are like building lists around Khorne or Slanesh and they want a deep strike. And I'm not sure if you're familiar, but the way their mechanic works is it modifies your leadership, and then it can deep strike within the leadership value. So
yeah, basically come closer than 9.
Exactly. And I've actually lost a couple of games because of this. So because they'll just start deep strike, they'll drop like 3 squads of bloodletters, and then they'll drop like a massive what's it called, like greater demon of Khorne or whatever they call it.
Bloodthirster.
Bloodthirster, yes, they'll drop a massive ass bloodthirster in my face, like 6 inches away. And then, and I'm not about that life, to be honest with you. I don't really want that happening to me. So also the flamers, getting all these units that just deep striking in front of me. And instead what I'm trying to do is I've decided to take. Now I'm having to take a warlord trait, especially for singles, which prevents any modifiers to my leadership or combat attrition. Because again, also if I fail morale on bikes, and then I have like another 2 run, I'm bleeding models that I do not want to bleed, and it's improving the trading, the 1-to-1 trading, 1-to-2 trading, or whatever my opponent's been able to do. I don't want to stop that. So I'm actually finding, and this is a really long-winded answer, but I actually find a really big struggle between CP, because I think Votann have such good answers to the meta with the warlord traits or the relics, but also that I find that there's not much value in the warriors, that I'm having to take detachments that cost a lot of CP. Does that answer the question, or is that just too long?
Yeah, it answers the question perfectly, but it also touches upon something else, and I think it was like the second time you mentioned this. The army, at least the way you were describing it, it sounds, you compared it to Custodes even, so like it looks and sounds like an elite army almost. Does that mean that it's poor at trading, that it doesn't have good trading units?
I think the problem it has is it doesn't have good screens.
Right.
So the trading
You're exposed all the time. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. The trading is fantastic. Like the bike squad, it has insane damage. However, if you shoot it back, it's only 20 wounds if you take a 6-man squad. 20 wounds, a toughness 5 or 6, 5 up invulnerable. It's not as survivable as people think. And I think people look at it and think, oh, you can't reroll wound roll, so it's actually really tanky with armor of content. But actually, it's got a 4 base save. It's the same with Ein here, half guard. The toughness 5, 2 up armor save, -1 damage. However, I mean, if you shoot them with 40 shots or you get 40 wounds, you're gonna make you're definitely gonna make quite a few ones in their rolls. So actually, they do die. And the problem is for example, if you charge like a 70-point Repentia unit, into these half guard. Sure, the repentance unit dies, but they're taking more than 70 points with them. And I find the problem is they don't trade efficiently in that sense a lot because they're so high on wounds. But at the same time, you don't also have a lot of screens. So, for example, if you say, for the problem I find is I have a really good damage output, but I only have 10 warriors. So if I want to create a screen of 10 warriors, somewhere else is going to have a problem. And there's really smart ways of playing about that, especially like, for example, if you've got a big L somewhere, you can then stage your half guard there, and the relic stops deep strikes of 12 inches. So if there's a teleportation unit for like 1,000 suns, I can use I can provide protection to other units by smart positioning, but at the same time, I don't have mortal wound screens. So on an open map, and a Tyranid that just drops Tyrannocytes with like zone tropes, something's dead, and sometimes it's just a bit too much. And I find the trading can be a bit limited because there's just no real screens.
Right. Has any of you actually played, and I always ask this when we analyze an army because I always find this interesting, because if an army is popular, sooner or later this thing is going to happen, and by the thing I mean mirror matches. Has any one of you actually played a mirror match? And does a mirror match between Leagues of Votann boil down to whoever goes first, or is it actually a game of chess?
I think it's for me. I haven't played this one yet because I mostly play not on TTS but live, and currently live there are like 2 people in 3 cities that have 2K army of Votanns, and I am one of those. So it's pretty hard. But actually, I gave some thought about it because initially I was playing not the Emir mostly, but the league that gives you +1 toughness. For some crazy units of warriors and all that stuff, warriors with 6 toughness and feel no pains. So I think that mirror matches, the meta mirror matches between the Votanns will go to the syndrome of current edition, who will roll better, and some maneuvering also included. But mostly, like you said, it's gonna be a chess game. Who will maneuver better with the bikes, and who will roll better at tables.
Mm-hmm.
But
Danny,
that's me.
Yeah, I don't think it requires having, like, I played the mirror 3 times now. And I don't think it's a case of who goes first. I think it's more a case of who's built what list, because we're going to see different kinds of lists. I think we're going to see predominantly 3 sort of types of lists, and I think each one sort of can counter the other one quite well. And it's definitely a chess match, and it's more understanding your opponent's list, of course, as it is with any army, and knowing how to deal with that matchup. But also, you're going to hit a rock, paper, scissors scenario where a lot of different things like dice, yes, like we said, dice always come into play, but also then the table. And this goes back to what I said about I don't care about the table, I care about my opponent's agency on their table. What table benefits them, less about me, because I can play this, my kind of list can play on any kind of table. It's more about how can my opponent abuse the table for them. And say, for example, if I go against a land fortress build and they're on an open table, I'm in a bit of trouble. However, if they're on a closed table, I can win that really easily. So for me, there's quite a few different factors in the mirror, and it's actually quite an exciting mirror, I would say. Like, there are 3 mirrors that I find really fun. GSC is a really, really fun mirror because that's very much skill intensive, and it's not about who goes first. Because if you go first, your opponent has whoever goes second has an advantage in that matchup. So there's a really high skill cap to that kind of matchup. Same with Harleys. There's a massive skill cap in that matchup, and I think in Votann as well. I think there is that, and it's actually a really fun mirror, I find.
Excuse me, sir. Have you ever played a Knight's Mirror? That is pretty crazy.
I've never played a Knight's Mirror, and I assume playing the mirror is like watching paint dry. But Knights is not an army for me, to be honest with you. I tried it and I just found it quite boring. So
it's either watching paint dry or just blowing everything in one turn.
are we talking about Imperial Knights and everyone just puts bonds on each other and tries to kill each other with a 4-up invulnerable, saving a -1 damage? Or are we talking Chaos Knights? I don't know.
That prevents rerolls, have feel no pains, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not selling it really well. But listen, guys, I want to move to the last segment of this discussion. I would like to do it in such a way that I selected what I think are how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 armies that are top of the meta right now. And I would like you to give me the supposed prediction of a win versus loss against that army. And obviously, we can delve a little bit on each and every single one, because if I throw out Tyranids, obviously there are, Leviathan Tyranids, probably not anymore, but Kraken, Behemoth, Jormungandr, they probably play differently. But there are going to be armies like Harlequins where you probably stick to just one Sadath or Sisters or something. So I'm going to throw out an army. I would like you to tell me, how likely is it for the Votann to win? And then also, does that army have any mechanics? Can you think of any mechanics that the Votann army is specifically susceptible to, for example?
Right, can I pick this up a tiny bit? Because I imagine me and Vitalis have 2 different lists.
Okay.
If Vitalis could just tell us quickly what list he runs, and then we can give it we can give it from his perspective of his list and my perspective from mine, because I think different lists will have different problems.
Yeah, true.
A fair point.
So
that's a good approach.
My list that I recently played from 2K was Haikal, the Grimnir, the surprisingly Anchor champion that sucks. 3 squads of warriors, 3 squads of bikes, fortress, 6 armies, and 7 zerpers. So that was my take, more of a mobile gun line than what Danny said, total mobility. But yeah, I can see we are leaning the same mobile point here.
Okay, that does differ slightly actually, because of the warriors and the land fortress. And I think actually the inclusion of a land fortress and leaning in that is quite pivotal, obviously, to the list. Where I think some of the top meta you'll do better against. Is it a land fortress with the Magna Rail or a land fortress with the Beamer?
With the Magna.
The Magna. Okay, yeah. So definitely you're definitely going to have a better time against some armies, and I'm going to struggle against. And you'll struggle against armies that I might be good against with my list. And so this is a good exercise actually. And my list is basically a Karl, a Grimnir. So it's a Haikal Grimnir, 10 warriors with just a medipack, 18 bikes with Hylas and all the buffs, 2 squads of 5 berserkers, 2 Sagittars with the Mata autocannons, and 8 half guard with the Volkite, the swords, and the teleport relic. So it's quite a high mobile list. So it's different. So now we can get into now that we know what we're talking about, we can get into the matchups.
Yeah, I guess we should start with those lists.
Yeah, which leagues are those for you, Vitalis?
For me, it's Emir.
And
Same.
For you, Danny? Oh, okay. All right. So at least we know that now. Okay. So I'm going to throw out an army. Whoever wants to pick it up and give me your prediction of what the game would look like and what dangers await you. Let's start with Tau.
So maybe I will start, as I have some insight on Tau also. From my perspective, I think it's 50-50. Because, like I said, I have a mobile gun line, and Tau is also similarly mobile gun line. So it's pretty hard to say right now. I think I have the edge of having a lot of impulse that Tau sometimes struggle. I have the edge of combat units. Like the Zerkers and especially the Terminators in that matchup can go clutch. because they can teleport somewhere crazy and cause some havoc from the backline. So 50-50 from my side.
Okay, Danny.
For me, it requires two things: A, if they've got planes, and B, if there is a sort of terrain on the flanks that I can stage behind. So if they have
Let's
planes,
assume it has planes because I think that's the most common build right now.
yeah, I am actually seeing
everyone
some builds
around.
Yeah, I am seeing some builds without planes, and I would say if they've not got planes, it's a really easy matchup for me. I would say if they've got planes, it forces me to be a bit more defensive, so it can be a bit of a struggle. But I still think I win. However, I think it's more dependable on whether I've got this ruin on either flank to stage behind. Because what that forces the opponent to do is have to overextend and reposition, and then I've got full agency with my mobility. If I haven't got something like that or something in the middle or anything that I can use to my advantage, then it's a bit of a struggle. But overall, I think I win it every time so far.
Okay, that's great. Moving on to Harlequins. Vitalis, what do you think?
Like I said, I think they will be the boogeyman of Votann, because you cannot reposition fast enough. They will catch you anyway. Their shooting is decent. The combat is insane, like always with Harleys. So I predict a loss here because there is not much talking about the Harlequins build.
Okay, Danny.
Yeah. If my opponent knows what he's doing, there's not really much I can do. The problem is that they have better scoring, and they have so many ways to sort of shut down movement. And because of the transports, and then you've got to get them inside the trading, it's just really difficult to play around. It's a really hard matchup.
Okay, all right. What do you think is going to be the most common Harlequin build right now? Because I think we saw a lot of light Harlequins, but I hear that Twilight might now be the go-to sort of say that after the nerfs because of the movement shenanigans and so on. Do you think that's what we're going to see? Is that something that the Polish players are trying out already?
It's hard to say. I think I've seen so far a lot of the Poles are still playing light. Personally, I could be wrong, but for me, Twilight is much better on something like the USO map, because the way their terrain works is you could have big units of troops that can just sit there and not get touched, and then they've got a nice, easy mobility or movement lane to get to where they want to go and stage behind. So it's perfect for USO. Again, Twilight can be good on like really really heavy to UTC maps, but I think if you've got like a big squad and then you get into like a really open map, it's really difficult to play into. So until we get consistent maps, and like we're perhaps in our tournaments we'll see just consistent maps, not all 1-8, but maybe just 4, then maybe we might see Twilight. But right now I still don't think it's going to be as popular as Light, because Light is still quite a safe pick, whereas Twilight is quite high risk, I would say.
Okay, understood. Let's move on to another powerhouse in the meta right now, so Tyranids. As I said, there will be different flavors of Tyranids, although Leviathan is most likely going away. So we have Behemoth, we have the very quick Kraken, and then the -1 and deep striking shenanigans from Jormungandr. I'll start with Danny this time. Have you had an opportunity to play against any of those, and how did you do?
I've played against Tyranids of every flavor of ice cream. The biggest problem I've had with Tyranids is two things. 3 things actually. If someone has Tyranocytes and they just want to throw in zone probes, I've mentioned this before. If they want to just throw in zone probes, like a couple of players are doing in Poland, then that's a big problem, because there's nothing I can do to stop that. So that's one thing. If they've got that, that's a really difficult matchup, because they can just, especially if they go first, they can just alpha and get rid of something, and I like bikes, for example. So that's one thing. The other thing, if they've got harpies, then it becomes a much more difficult matchup. If they don't, then it's a lot more manageable. And the reason
similar to Tau, right?
Exactly. You can see a bit of a consistent theme here. The problem with that is half guard. If they have a plane that can come and drop bombs, I cannot start half guard on the board because I do not want if I've got 8, that's what technically 2 models I've lost. 90 points I'll lose, or if they spike high, which obviously they always do, and get like 6 to 8 models, then I'm losing 3 to 4 models. So I cannot do that. So it's forcing me to have to put them into deep strike. And a lot of people already do that, but I think I like to keep them on the board because they do still have a 22-inch stat range on Volkite. So it forces my opponent to have to play around this. And I like that because then I don't have to, I can have that impact from turn 1. It's quite, it's tactical. So if they've got planes and they've got harpies, I can't do that. So it makes it quite a difficult matchup for me in that sense, especially if they go first. So that's 2 things. The other thing is the Hive Tyrant, and the Hive Tyrant is still always a problem. However, it's a bit of a problem, less of a problem now, but it's still a problem. Obviously, and it sounds silly because you might think, well, everyone takes a Hive Tyrant, but we are seeing, like you say, Jorgmunder lists perhaps where they're taking 2 Tyrants instead of a Flyrant. Sorry, they're taking Hive Tyrants and not a Flyrant. But then I think the biggest problem right now is if someone just spawns Carnifexes and Tyrannifexes with the big damage and they just throw that into, like, say, a land fortress. I've played games where I've lost 3 land fortresses in one turn.
Holy crap. But it does seem like a go-to build after Leviathan nerf. Like, all I've heard and seen are Carnifexes. And yeah.
I think right now I'm going to be okay-ish with Kraken builds and Behemoth builds. I think if someone starts building into Carnifexes and Tyrannifexes and Jorgmunder, I think I might start seeing problems. But yeah, for me, Jorgmunder and Harpies are more of the problems. So if they've not got that, then it's a lot easier now to deal with.
Okay. Vitalis, have you had any chance to play Tyranids?
No, with Votanns not yet, especially not after the nerfs, recent nerfs. But similar things here. My list got one thing that Danny's list lacks. I got a chaff to throw against Mortal Wound spam. So against some zone tropes, I think I will fare a bit better.
You can screen. Mm.
Yeah, I can just throw warriors, throw some feel no pains, maybe even save some of those guys if I roll some 6s. And then counter strike with bikes and fortress. But yeah, the fortress is going to be primary target for all the Tyranids big guns, and those are well pretty good at killing tanks, as our games usually told us against my knights, where you were able to kill like 3 of those turns sometimes. So yeah, against some builds, it's still gonna be very, very, very tough matchup. Against some, maybe not as much, especially against lists that rely on those mortals from Psychic, because I have range advantage against those. Against Tyrannofexes, Carnifexes, some Tyrant with Shard Gullet, maybe not so much. Flyrants also is going to be still a big issue because they are heavy hitting in combat, even heavier than anything my list packs. So if they reach me, I can be in a bit of trouble. So okay. A bit more positive than Danny, but not very much.
Just to add in on that, if you've got just zone tropes and not a Tyrannocyte, I don't care about zone tropes because they only move so much range, and they're not going to alpha strike.
You can also outmaneuver them. Yeah, true.
Exactly. The problem I have is the alpha strike potential, because if they go first and they drop Tyrannocytes and then they just waddle out some zone tropes, there's nothing I can do. I can't play around that because you have 3 squads of warriors. I don't. So I mean, and then obviously people might say, well, why don't you get some screens? Well, I don't think it's going to break my list, so I can't do that. I can only have 1 max. So if they have Tyrannocytes, it's a problem. If they don't, I actually have no issue right now with things like zone tropes. And yeah, so it's just mostly the alpha strikes that I struggle. That I think my list kind of struggles with. But if there's no alpha strike potential, I have a really good win ratio right now.
Okay, so let's move to, first of all, an army that is very common in Poland, and I think many people are happy to see it back and to see it having a strong codex. Second, a mechanic that is almost like alpha striking and might hurt you. So Chaos Daemons. Danny, have you played against them already? How did you fare? Is there any sort of, as I mentioned, mechanic that the Votann are specifically susceptible to?
Yeah, so this is interesting actually because again, in Poland, a lot of people are now playing demons. I think demons are way better than people are people are saying. And actually, I think demon players are in a little bit of denial about how strong the codex is, because
Agreed.
their board control is unlike any other army in the entire game. And if they build around that, and build around their deep strike mechanic, leadership mechanic, they are just so strong. But a lot of people are in denial about this. Like a lot of people were in denial about the Void Weavers, or they were in denial about Tyranids, and still are. Anyway, saying that, I've struggled a lot recently with this demons for two reasons. Number one is they have, like I say, if you've not got the screens to stop the deep strike, deny the deep strike mechanic, then they have full agency on how they approach the game. So obviously the big boogeyman in this matchup is the Flamers. The Flamers are insane. They have they are D6 shot D6 shots each, strength 5, AP 2
D6
damage
plus 3.
D6 plus 3 shots, strength 5, AP 2 damage 1, which they can then be given +1 to wound and +1 strength. So for most of the units outside of the vehicles, everything is toughness 5 or lower. You can make one unit toughness 6, but predominantly everything is toughness 5 or lower. So if you start racking up these buffs, +1 to wound, on strength 6, they're wounding, let's say, your bikes or your half guards or whatever on 2s. And when you start factoring, say, a squad of 6, it's going to be 39 shots on average. That's a lot.
You can just pop them for CP to have max shots on top of that.
Fantastic, easy. So you can do that, and things like this, and that sounds good. That doesn't sound that doesn't sound too strong, although it is. But people will tell you it's not. The problem is they can pop up when they need them to. Whereas you can't do that with your models necessarily. Like your bikes are strategic reserves. Yeah, your Terminators can pop up, and yes, they have Volkites, and yes, they can get to AP2 if they want to, but they don't care. They got a 3-up save, and yes, they have Volkites, but at the same time, it's 3. You're not going to have 3 squads of Terminators versus 3 squads of Flamers. They're always going to have 3 squads of Flamers, but then they can have the melee things. The melee ones can pop up, and with a 6-inch. 6-inch charge, they can start wrecking things like bikes, they can start wrecking things like warriors, etc. So for me, their mechanic outplays Votann. And I know Vladdy lost to Votann and he's screaming that actually Votann counter demons. That's completely wrong, but that we can all do that. I'm sorry, I disagree with him. Their mechanic outplays Votann, and if a demon player builds into this mechanic, there's not really much Votann can do apart from take this one warlord trait that denies modifiers to leadership and chapter approved combat attrition. And this is what I'm now having to play with in singles because everyone, like you say, it's so popular in this country that I'm guaranteed to play it twice, like Drukhari when Drukhari came out. I'm guaranteed to play it 2 to 3 times a tournament. So this is the only thing I can see to help even the score, but I think it's a counter, unfortunately.
Okay, so an uphill battle. Vitalis, any comment on that?
Yeah, I can comment freshly on that because, like I said yesterday, I played against the Votanns and I played with demons. So I am totally on board with Danny here.
Which poor bastard?
Actually, I lost that game, but we'll get to that in a second.
You're not really helping the narrative we're trying to build.
No, exactly. No. I'm exactly on board with you, but let me get to the point. So the game was pretty one-sided until one moment, because the Tsinch Greater Demon popped everything from mortals at the start. The Flamers came down and burned pretty much everything they had sight on. I was dropping Flamers, and I was just at some point at the first squad of the Flamers, we were. No, sorry, it was even second squad of the Flamers. We were like, should I roll this, or will you just take those guys out? Because both I rolled those attacks and both ended the same. I think the one, maybe not the counter, but also I think to explore this matchup was actually the Fortress, because that was the thing that won him the game. The Fortress with a Brocknir took the blunt of the charge. It was a 1,000 point game, not 2,000, but it gives both our lists were pretty scaled down meta lists. So the Fortress took whole charge of the blood thirster, like I mentioned, and it still lived. Screening with Fortresses in this matchup is not as crazy idea as it sounds. Especially with Brocknir hanging around, because these things can take a punishment, and demons have nothing to bypass invulns on the combat units, aside from some mortals that are not also spammed but rolled on sixes, so not end of the world here. And that's why I lost this game, because I had no method of bringing down the Fortress at the end.
You actually make a really good point there. Just to interject really quickly, I think a lot of mistakes I see people play is they play Fortresses defensively, and actually
keep them in the back or something like that.
Yeah, and actually they are really good as aggressive units that can just move 10 inches forward. They charge something. They tie them up. They have a Brokey just like running in behind. And actually, because they can shoot in combat, they can do quite a lot of damage. And they can free themselves to shoot something else. Playing them aggressively is really good.
All right. So I'll move on, because this episode is turning lengthy. Let's go to Sisters really quickly. So has any of you played the Sisters? Is that a good matchup, a bad matchup?
Danny, I give my voice here to you, because I have played so little Sisters matchup recently that I cannot score them with any army right now. I am not feeling confident to do that.
Fair enough. Okay, so ironically, I've actually got a tournament game against Sisters on TTS straight after this. Sisters for me. The problem with Sisters is they are very cost effective for what they provide. So Zephyrim, when they charge you and they're doing, what is it, like 5 attacks, I think, on the charge, and then they get full rerolls, and then they get extra hits on sixes, and then they can be given +1 to wound. So they're wounding probably all of your stuff apart from the Fortresses on 4s. So we're talking a squad of like 7 is what, 35 attacks, 36 attacks, rerolling everything, hitting on 3s, +1, 6s, basically a lot of attacks. As we mentioned earlier, pure weight
volumes
of dice
kill Votann. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Pure weight of dice, pure volumes kill Votann. And that would be all forgiven. However, it's really hard to screen out Sisters, or not screen out Sisters necessarily, but really get enough distance from Sisters and not shoot yourself in the foot, because their miracle dices allow them to have really, really outrageous charges if they get lucky and roll like a 6 or a 5 on the miracle dice. So anticipating the threat range and staying far away can actually, because especially when they can get like +1 to move, so they move 13 inches, they got a 25-inch threat range on Zephyrim. Or the Repentia can like advance and charge. That's 30. They can go 13 inches and then another 12, so another 25 inches. They have so much agency in this matchup and so much damage that they're, like we're saying, their 1-to-1 trading is just way better. Like one Zephyrim will pick up 6 bikes, or one Repentia full squad will pick up 6 bikes, or they'll pick up they'll absolutely pick up half guard, even with the -1 damage, if they get quite good rolls with the rerolls and all the buffs. So it's actually a really hard, difficult matchup. That would be forgiven if they did not have such easy to score secondaries as well. So because of these two factors, it's just a really big counter if you ask me.
Okay, that's an interesting take. I didn't expect that. I thought you would say you steamroll through them and you don't look back.
Surprisingly, Hammer of Contempt on cheap bodies is actually quite good.
Mm.
One does not steamroll at sisters.
Yeah,
that I know.
Listen, guys, two more armies to go. Two that are actually three. So I'll start with this, I guess, the simpler one. That has a single build, which is Necrons. Vitalis, you play Necrons. I think there isn't an army that you don't play, but you do know Necrons well. So if you haven't played them, even on a hypothetical level, how well do you think the Votann fare into Necrons with like?
I think that's the same scenario that I played on our team championship recently, where you table them and they still outscore you. Because you, like Danny mentioned, even if you have empty table, you can suck at scoring, because all the obsects the Necrons have, you just cannot compete with that. So firepower wise, you win. You will table them, I think, about round 3 or round 4.
But it's way too late, right?
Yeah, it's way too late. The round 3 is absolute tops you can do to even compete with the Necrons. Round 4 is gonna be too late to win. So you will table them, but you will lose some points. That's my take, and that's pretty much all armies can say about Necrons. So
right now, at least, yeah. Danny, agreed? Disagreed?
Yeah, you can't outscore them. You've got to have a really early. You've got to have a really solid game plan, I would say. And you've got to really just push it. You can outplay them. That's what's important here. Is I think you can outplay them. Necrons are very, what's the word? I can't think of English today. They're very obvious in how they play. Predictable. They're very predictable. You know what they're going to do. You know how they're going to do it. They are very specific objectives, secondaries. You know what they're going to do. So you can outplay this. So, for example, you could throw some bikes, or if you're GTL, for example, you can throw a load of warriors onto an objective, and or throw your bikes onto an objective and stop their 3 bikes from coming and doing the action because they don't control it.
yeah, but usually it's not 3 bikes. Sorry to interrupt you. It's not 3 bikes anymore. It's going to be like 10 bikes and the scarabs going behind. So I will disagree a bit here.
I was just about to say, I find the hardest build is the one that doesn't use Silent King, because the Silent King, the minute he pops out, he's dead. He is not surviving any shooting that this army does because of tokens. However, the hardest I find is 9 scarabs with a 5-up invulnerable save. Because Votann have really good shooting, but they're not going to do 36 wounds to the scarabs, and then the scarabs will keep reanimating, and they're just going to keep them from, they're just going to absolutely ruin their day. The more creative Necron players get, the easier it is, I think, because destroyers are really good. Yeah, they can fire a lot of shots. They don't kill an entire bike squad. They don't kill a fortress, and then they get picked up. They'll pick up the destroyers, but they won't pick up the scarabs. And I find, actually, if you, like you just said, if you start tailoring into big squads of scarabs or bikes, then it becomes a problem. And that is a matchup I don't think they'll win. But then that is also a really boring army to play. Who on earth would enjoy that?
Okay. And yeah, talking about him, the last army that I wanted to bring up, Chaos Space Marines. So both of you, again, play this army, I know. However, I wanted to focus on the 2, I think, most common builds. One that has been prominent for a longer while. The second one that I think came to light after the LGT. So first of all, Creations of Bile, and secondly, Emperor's Children. So Emperor's Children with Abaddon, with a Terminator brick, with Noise Marines, like 5 or 6 units of Noise Marines, some Venom Crawlers or something like that, and Creations of Bile, obviously, with like Possessed and the other combination of units. How do you think you would fare against those two army combinations?
So maybe I'll start because I will be, I think, brief here. I haven't yet played against Creations of Bile, nor against Emperor's Children, but I saw Emperor's Children at work at LGT.
Right.
So it will be all hypothetical from my side. But I think there is enough firepower on Votann side, enough mobility especially to outmaneuver, outfire those guys. Because the Noise Marines does not have, you have like to have like 5 squads of those guys to put a dent on something really important for Votanns, and getting shot in the meantime. Especially with the fortresses, the fortress can stand some serious punishment from CSM firepower. The Terminators brick gonna be an issue, but again, they are not the fastest unit in the codex, so you can also do some fancy maneuvering around them and slowly chip them away, throwing some, in my case, especially some chaff warriors to be eaten in the meantime. So I will take my chances with the Emperor's Children. I think it will be mostly skill matchup, maybe a bit of a table here because of my big ass fortress, like Danny mentioned. And no comment about the Creations of Bile from my side. I have 0 experience with that.
Okay, Danny, have you managed to play against any of those?
I have actually. So Creations of Bile is I've never even I never thought Creations of Bile was that good in the first place, because like their entire problem with their mechanic, it just doesn't work against Votann, because if you get shot and not stabbed, you can't fight on death.
Pretty much, which denies the whole point of this army.
Exactly. And this is one of the reasons why, I mean, we've said this on another podcast, why I never valued them in the first place, because against half the armies, in fact, most of the armies in the meta, you do nothing against them. They're a bit of a they stomp middle table, and yeah, they do really well in USO because of their terrain. But in WTC, they're just going to get shot before they even get into combat, because Votann bikes or whatever is called, they're fast. Right, Sagittars, damage to and everything, they'll pick them up really quickly. So that's not an issue. So Creations of Bile is not a problem. Emperor's Children is an interesting one. The problem with Emperor's Children is they have. I think it's actually a really difficult matchup, depending on that 2 things. The first one is A, what your list is, and B, how the table is set, which is really obvious, because if they can shoot you, you're going to die, because they have a 48-inch range on their gun. 48-inch range. So, and the fortress moves 10 inches and has a 34-inch range, 36-inch range. Sorry, I got hiccups. 36-inch range. So they're moving a 46-inch range. Unless it's in me and then it gets plus 4 inches and it's 40. What that means is they can outrange you. And if they have, say, 6 squads of Noise Marines and they've got rerolls, they'll shoot your fortress, I'm pretty sure they're gonna almost kill it.
And they can pretty efficiently keep you at range with the Terminator brick and a baton going to the middle of the table, which they usually do.
So yeah, so for me, if you play a fortress build, exactly, I think actually this is a really difficult matchup, especially if you go first. If you go first, you have to position, and no doubt they're hiding. So yeah, if you go first, you're gonna really struggle. On UKTC, that's a bit different. But even on UKTC, again, they've got plenty of places where they'll hide all these Noise Marines, and then you're going to deal with a Terminator brick. However, with my particular list, I've actually not had many struggles with them. And that's mostly because I have quite a lot of mobility in my list. And I can obviously I'll throw one bike squad into strategic reserves, but then if I go first, my bikes can go 24 inches, and I'm going to start picking out noise marines left, right, and center. And once I've killed all them, I don't even care about terminators. Like my advice to anybody listening to this: if you play against CSM and they've got 10 terminators, you don't ever even look at the terminators. You just play around them until they fail their prior, and then you go balls deep in that Terminator brick as much as possible. The second they don't get Truncate Man, they roll one, you just go balls deep and you wipe out that Terminator squad. If they keep getting the prey, you just play around them and go for the Nose Marines, because the Terminators cannot win the game. And this is why I moved away from a Terminator brick in my CSM list, is because they cannot win the game. And if you start taking out the Nose Marines, then it's an easy game, to be honest with you. So I think it boils down to the list and how much you can hide from them Blastmasters. But then Blastmasters really hurt. Jesus Christ. It's what, 3 shots each? If the 6 has 18 shots, and in 24-inch range is damage 4. So there's a lot of damage they put out. But for me, I would swing CSM towards Votann as the winner, to be honest.
All right. We got to the end of my questions, at least. We got to whatever I wanted to cover. Any last words, guys? Because I'm going to wrap the episode, but maybe, to have like this, what is it? To go back to what we mentioned at the very beginning, the army, when we were going into this, not even this interview, but when we were looking at this army, let's say a month ago, it did seem like a great threat. It did seem like something that might break the meta, that might, even affect how the tournaments are played. Do you think that is going to come to fruition? Danny, do you think that the Votann are a serious threat to the meta, that they are a meta-breaking or meta-changing army? Do you think that other players, other armies will have to build specifically against them, or are they just an army like any other?
I mean, I think they are a meta-changing army in some sense. I think we're going to start seeing a lot of flat 3 damage being a priority, because that flat 3 damage just wrecks everything in this army. So I do think that they are going to change it in high AP, high strength, flat 3 damage. Like anti-tank stuff is going to kill this army really quickly. So I think that's going to be really important. Do I think it's going to start crushing tournaments? Not necessarily. I think it's going to have the same issue that I see with, say, some CSM builds. That they'll crush, they'll go 4-0, and then towards the top of the tables, the ones that sort of are there, the ones that also kind of counter this army. So like Demons are at the top, they'll struggle. Harleys are at the top, they'll struggle. And some really solid Nids build also at the top, and they'll struggle. So you'll go 4-1 without problem. If you get lucky with matchups, yes, you'll go 5-0, but you're gonna crash a wall at the top table, and it's gonna be a pretty intense wall. So yeah, we'll find out. Maybe I'll be wrong after this weekend, or maybe I'll be right. We'll find out.
Okay, fingers crossed for your performance over there. Vitalis, any last sentences from you? Do you think that this army is going to break the meta, going to come on top of tournaments, or not really?
Before the nerfs, I would slightly lean towards that opinion. Right now, no. Right now, I think it's army like any other. It will require some shifts in some of the lists, especially like I experienced. -1 to wounds are not as effective as they were before, or some things like that. But definitely not anything meta breaking, anything worth banning and creating a shitstorm over that. For sure, a solid army. For sure, fun army. For sure, very, very competitive that we will see at the top tables. But like Danny mentioned, maybe not eventually winning the events, because there are some hard counters for them.
Okay, fantastic. That sets me in a positive mood, because I know they're going to be appearing in tournaments. I know that I am going to face them with my now 2 armies, Tyranids and Death Guard. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I'll wrap the episode. So thank you guys for I think one of the deepest insights on this army out there on the internet right now. So thank you, Danny, for your for the 90 games that you've played and the experience that you shared with us. Vitalis, also thank you for having giving us your insights into this with your alternative take with your different army. It was a pleasure to talk to you guys. And to our listeners, listen, we are back to regular content. The burnout is gone. We are all hyped for what is coming. We've seen the new tanks from Guard. We've seen all the rumors about Yarick being dead. We've heard about Votann, but we've heard about other the stuff that is coming, and we just cannot wait to see it all on the table. So we invite you to stick to us and to like, subscribe, hit the bell button and whatever you have in all those podcasting media and so on. Leave a positive review if you can, or just a comment on YouTube so that it helps with the algorithms. We have plenty of stuff coming up. We hope, and now I'm looking at you, Vitalis, we really hope to release one of the gag reels or bloopers from the LGT, because there were a couple of situations at least where we literally pissed our pants. So it would be awesome to have that.
You, not us.
mainly me. But still, some fun stuff. But we also, as usual, are going to focus on some competitive play on Wednesday. It looks like we will be recording an episode with the representatives of 2 top teams from a Swedish team tournament that took place this last weekend now, I can say. And we will have Neil Kerr, among others. So do tune in to find out what's happening in the Swedish meta right now and which armies are on top. And yeah, stick with us, because we are going to be putting out some awesome and, most importantly, regular content right now. One more time, thank you, Danny. Thank you, Vitalis.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.